Many pseudosciences have attempted to establish a forced connection with neuroscience in an effort to gain legitimacy. Practices and theories lacking plausibility and evidence often try to appropriate the credibility and prestige associated with studies of the human brain. A frequently cited example by psychoanalysts is a 2004 article published in Science titled Neural Systems Underlying the Suppression of Unwanted Memories. This study demonstrated that two brain regions, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, play fundamental roles in the voluntary suppression of memories. The prefrontal cortex is associated with the executive control needed to inhibit memories, while the hippocampus, crucial for memory formation and retrieval, shows reduced activity during this process. In summary, the study suggests that the prefrontal cortex inhibits the hippocampus's function, acting as a conscious mechanism for memory suppression. At this point, psychoanalysts often argue, Freud was right. They claim that research like this, along with studies on the neurobiology of trauma and dreams, validates the fundamental premises of psychoanalysis. But does it really? First and foremost, it's crucial to highlight that participants in this study were instructed to intentionally avoid certain memories. In other words, the study deals with conscious cognitive control processes, something far removed from the unconscious mechanism of repression proposed by Freud. In fact, the authors of the study themselves make no such connection. In their own words, it is sometimes stated that Freud intended a distinction between repression and suppression, with the performer being unconscious and the latter conscious. However, scholars of Freud have noted that this strong distinction in terminology is a distortion of Freud's view introduced by Anna Freud, and that Freud used repression to refer to both conscious and non-conscious acts. We use the term repression, but limit our discussion to its conscious variety. This kind of interpretation, taking neuroscientific findings and selectively aligning them with psychoanalytic propositions, is a classic example of what is known as cherry-picking. This term describes the practice of selecting only data that supports a particular viewpoint while ignoring contrary evidence. As a result, it creates the false impression that a theory or hypothesis has stronger empirical support than it actually does. Cherry-picking distorts reality and undermines the pursuit of scientific truth. Vague analogies between neuroscientific discoveries and psychoanalytic concepts are insufficient to validate psychoanalysis. The real test lies in subjecting its propositions, such as the id, ego, and superego, the Oedipus complex, psychosexual development stages, and defense mechanisms, to rigorous empirical investigation. Testability, replicability, and predictability are fundamental criteria for any scientific theory. And frankly, psychoanalysis has failed miserably to meet these criteria. While Freud may have had some genuine insights, many of the terms he coined have been assimilated, reinterpreted, and transformed over time. This often leads to the fallacy of equivocation, where a term is used with different meanings, resulting in misleading conclusions. A classic example would be, Freud discussed the unconscious, and modern neuroscience also investigates unconscious processes. Therefore, psychoanalysis has been confirmed by neuroscience. This argument is fallacious because Freud's unconscious and the unconscious processes studied in neuroscience are entirely different concepts. In neuroscience, the term refers to automatic brain mechanisms operating outside of explicit awareness. In contrast, Freud's unconscious is a theoretical construct filled with symbolic meanings and its own dynamic. The confusion of terms may seem compelling at first glance, but does not hold up to closer scrutiny. And here arises an important question. Why do so many psychoanalysts insist on linking neuroscientific discoveries to scattered quotes from Freud? Certainly, drawing historical parallels has its merit. But curiously, the same authors who connect Freud to such discoveries rarely mention figures like Plato, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, or William James, thinkers who also addressed themes related to the unconscious and the forces shaping human behavior. Could this reflect the desperation of a pseudoscience striving to be recognized as a science? Although some neuroscientific findings may occasionally echo concepts from psychoanalysis, this alone does not confer legitimacy to the theory. Science is not about establishing superficial correlations. It's about methodological rigor. To be recognized as science, a theory must have clear definitions, testable hypotheses, replicable empirical data, and the ability to consistently predict phenomena. Psychoanalysis, with all its speculation, fails to meet these criteria. Psychoanalysis is not scientific, and it fails to alleviate human suffering. In the end, it is nothing more than an empty doctrine, glorified by superficial interpretations and the repetition of outdated ideas. It's time to see it for what it really is: a belief system that, over time, has caused more harm than good.